The internet didn't just react, it convulsed. One moment, everything was normal. The next, Joe Rogan said a sentence so cold, so deliberate, so loaded with implication that it felt like the floor dropped out from under millions of viewers at the exact same time. Phones lit up. Screens froze. Comment sections exploded into digital riots as one terrifying question took over every platform at once. What does Joe Rogan know about Charlie Kirk's widow, and why is he saying it now? This wasn't a slip. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't speculation. The tone shift was instant and unmistakable. Joe leaned forward, his voice lowering, his expression hardening, and suddenly the studio felt like a crime scene instead of a podcast. He didn't accuse. He didn't explain. He didn't need to. Because the way he said it made one thing painfully clear: he had seen something. Heard something. Learned something he could no longer ignore. Within minutes, clips were ripped, reposted, and slowed down frame by frame. Fans noticed the pauses. The looks. The silence where denial should have been. Anonymous accounts began posting cryptic warnings. Old interviews resurfaced. Timelines stopped lining up. And then came the leaks, messages that looked too real, too specific, too dangerous to be coincidence. This wasn't just celebrity gossip anymore. This felt like a lid being ripped off something buried on purpose. And when Joe ended that segment with 4 chilling words, "That's not normal behavior," the internet realized it wasn't watching commentary. It was watching the beginning of a collapse. The moment Joe Rogan's voice changed, everyone felt it. Not just the viewers, not just the chat, but the people in the room who suddenly realized this wasn't another casual conversation drifting toward controversy. This was intentional. This was loaded. Joe didn't raise his voice. He didn't joke. He slowed down, leaned forward, and spoke with the kind of precision that only comes when someone has already decided they're done protecting a secret. He started by saying he hated vague rumors, hated half-truths, hated when people danced around uncomfortable realities. And then he said there were moments when silence became complicity. That was the warning shot. Viewers sensed it instantly. Something was coming, and once it landed, there would be no undo button. Joe referenced the weeks following Charlie Kirk's death, describing them as strange in ways nobody wanted to acknowledge. He talked about how the public narrative locked into place almost immediately, polished and rehearsed, like it had been waiting. He said grief usually looks messy, unpredictable, human. What he saw instead was control. Statements released with perfect timing. Appearances calculated down to the second. Absences that raised more questions than presence ever could. He didn't name her outright at first, but everyone knew exactly who he meant. The chat was already screaming her name before he ever hinted at it. And when he finally paused, exhaled, and said the word widow, the temperature in the room dropped. Joe explained that for months, he'd brushed off messages from people claiming something didn't sit right. He called it internet noise, the kind that always follows tragedy. But then the messages kept coming, from different places, people who didn't know each other, all pointing to the same night. The same window of time. The same behavior that didn't line up. He said the phrase that detonated everything: her behavior that night wasn't normal. Not emotional. Not frantic. Not confused. Just efficient. That single word echoed everywhere. Efficient. Clips of him saying it spread faster than anyone could track. Twitter turned into a battlefield within minutes. Joe went deeper, describing how insiders told him she appeared places before she was expected, asked questions before anyone knew to ask them, and seemed more concerned with access than answers. He talked about devices changing hands, passwords being reset, rooms being cleared. None of it illegal. None of it provable on its own. But together, it formed a pattern that made his skin crawl. He said patterns are what fighters look for, what investigators look for, what predators look for. And once you see one, you can't unsee it. The studio was silent. His guest didn't interrupt. Even the producers stayed still. Then Joe mentioned something he hadn't planned to say. He admitted there was footage. Not released. Not public. Footage he'd been shown privately that contradicted what everyone thought they knew. He refused to describe it in detail, but he did say it showed composure where panic should have been. Purpose where shock should have been. The chat exploded. Demands for proof flooded in so fast the feed lagged. Joe didn't flinch. He said he wasn't there to play internet detective. He was there because powerful people had asked him, quietly, to stop asking questions. That was when the mood shifted from gossip to danger. Within hours, anonymous accounts surfaced claiming to be former staff, former friends, former insiders. They posted screenshots of messages allegedly sent in the days leading up to Charlie's death. Messages filled with urgency, fear, and one recurring theme: something had been discovered. Something that couldn't be allowed out. Joe acknowledged he'd seen similar messages. He said what bothered him wasn't what they said, but what they didn't. Not concern for Charlie's safety. Concern for what he knew. That distinction hit viewers like a punch to the chest. Social media turned savage. Defenders scrambled. Critics smelled blood. Celebrity reactions poured gasoline on the fire. A well-known commentator posted a single sentence: "I always wondered why that timeline felt rushed." Another deleted an entire channel overnight. Fans noticed immediately. Reaction videos hit millions of views in hours, creators dissecting Joe's tone like it was a confession. Meanwhile, a supposed leaked audio clip began circulating, distorted and unverified, featuring a voice that sounded eerily calm saying, "If he releases this, it's over." Whether real or fake didn't matter anymore. The damage was done. The idea was out. Joe returned to the MIC later that night with a darker energy. He said he'd been warned that continuing down this path would complicate things. He laughed when he said it, but there was no humor in his eyes. He explained that someone close to the widow had reached out to him anonymously, claiming she hadn't acted alone. That sentence alone sent shockwaves through the internet. If true, it meant this wasn't grief gone wrong. It was coordination. Strategy. And Joe said the person promised receipts. Proof. Evidence that would make people rethink everything. As the episode neared its end, Joe stared directly into the camera, no jokes, no smile, and said he regretted not paying attention sooner. He said Charlie had trusted the wrong people, and that trust had consequences. Then he dropped the line that froze everyone watching. He said, "What I've seen next makes this look small." The feed was cut shortly after. No outro. No music. Just silence. By the time the screen went dark, hashtags were trending worldwide, friendships were fracturing in real time, and one thing was clear. This wasn't just a story unfolding. It was accelerating. And whatever Joe Rogan had just cracked open, it was nowhere near finished. By morning, the silence was gone. It had been replaced by noise so loud it felt physical. The kind of noise that rattles timelines, fractures alliances, and exposes nerves people didn't even know they had. Joe Rogan hadn't said another word, but he didn't need to. The internet was doing the talking for him now, and it was ruthless. Clips from the night before were everywhere, slowed down, zoomed in, subtitled, analyzed like evidence in a trial that hadn't officially started, but everyone knew was coming. Every pause Joe made was treated like a confession. Every eyebrow raise became a signal. And then came the alleged recording. A short audio clip, heavily distorted, but chilling in its calm. A female voice said, "We can't let this turn into questions." A male voice replied, "It won't, if everyone sticks to the plan." No names. No confirmation. But within minutes, people were comparing speech patterns to old interviews, lining up inflections, matching cadence. Experts weighed in, some saying it was inconclusive, others saying it was uncomfortably close. Joe didn't confirm it was real. He didn't deny it either. He just said, "I know who sent it to me." That sentence alone sent shockwaves through the commentariat. Behind the scenes, cracks started showing in public reactions. A prominent ally who had defended the widow aggressively went silent overnight, deleting posts, limiting comments. Another posted a long statement about letting authorities handle things, that read more like an exit than support. Fans noticed. They always do. Joe pointed out that silence can be louder than denial. He said people don't stop talking when nothing's wrong. They stop when lawyers tell them to. That line went viral within minutes. Social media descended into full-blown chaos. Twitter wars erupted between those calling Joe reckless and those calling him the only one brave enough to speak. TikTok timelines filled with side-by-side comparisons of official statements and leaked claims. Reddit threads ballooned into thousands of comments, users building elaborate timelines that contradicted the accepted story in dozens of small, but devastating ways. One user claimed to find a discrepancy involving a meeting that was publicly denied, but privately acknowledged elsewhere. Another pointed out that a device logged activity after it was supposedly secured. Joe referenced both without naming sources, saying the internet was connecting dots faster than professionals. Then a new twist dropped. A former associate went live unexpectedly, visibly shaking, eyes darting off screen like someone was in the room with them. They said they'd been warned not to talk, that they'd signed documents they didn't fully understand at the time. They claimed the widow had demanded access to materials she'd never shown interest in before. Halfway through the stream, the video cut. The account disappeared minutes later. Joe reacted live, jaw tight, saying, "That right there is why people are scared." He called it the most telling moment so far. Celebrity reactions poured fuel on the fire. A well-known media figure tweeted that they'd always felt something was off, but never said anything because it wasn't their place. Another posted a vague message about betrayal that fans immediately linked to the scandal. Even people with no direct connection began weighing in, sensing blood in the water. Joe warned against mob mentality, but he didn't discourage scrutiny. He encouraged questions. He said the truth doesn't fear attention. Then came the confrontation rumor. Multiple sources claimed there had been a heated exchange weeks before Charlie's death, involving raised voices and a demand for transparency. The widow allegedly walked out. Joe said he'd heard about it too, long before the internet did. He said what stuck with him wasn't the argument itself, but what followed, a sudden tightening of access, a reshuffling of who knew what. He said control always increases when fear sets in. And someone, somewhere, had been terrified. Late that night, Joe revealed the existence of something he hadn't mentioned before. A document. Not a manifesto, not a confession, but a list. A list of names Charlie had allegedly been looking into, people connected by money, influence, and favors. Joe didn't say who was on it. He didn't say how he knew. He just said the widow's name appeared near the top in a context that raised serious questions. The reaction was instant and explosive. Supporters cried foul. Critics said it explained everything. Joe ended that segment by saying, "If this list is real, it changes the motive entirely." The pressure intensified. Lawyers issued statements warning against speculative narratives. Platforms began flagging content. Videos were demonetized, taken down, reinstated, taken down again. It only made people more suspicious. Joe said attempts to suppress discussion were backfiring. He said when people feel controlled, they dig harder. And dig they did. Then, just as fatigue began to set in, another anonymous message dropped. This one was different. Shorter. More confident. It claimed the widow hadn't acted independently and hadn't even been the architect of what happened. It claimed she was following instructions. The post ended with a promise. You're about to meet the person who really benefited. Joe read it live, fell silent, and for the first time looked genuinely shaken. He took a long breath and said he'd just received confirmation from a source he trusted deeply. Someone who had nothing to gain and everything to lose. Someone who said the widow had been coached, guided, and protected. Joe didn't say by whom. He said he needed one more verification before going public. He ended the episode with a warning that sent chills through everyone watching. This story isn't about grief anymore, he said quietly. It's about power. And then he added the line that detonated the next wave of panic. And the person pulling the strings hasn't been mentioned yet. The stream cut. Notifications exploded. And somewhere behind the scenes, someone realized their name might be next. By the time the next stream went live, it felt less like a podcast and more like a countdown. The internet wasn't waiting anymore. It was bracing. Overnight, the story had mutated from scandal into something darker, heavier, more dangerous. This wasn't about curiosity now. It was about stakes. Joe Rogan opened the broadcast without music, without small talk, without even a greeting. He looked straight into the camera, eyes bloodshot, jaw tight, and said one sentence that instantly shut the internet up. He said people had tried to stop him. Not publicly. Privately. Quietly. And that alone told everyone everything they needed to know. Joe explained that after the previous episode, his phone hadn't stopped buzzing. Not with hate. Not with fans. With warnings. He said some were framed as concern, others as friendly advice, and a few as thinly veiled threats. All of them carried the same message: this has gone far enough. Joe laughed once, a short, humorless sound, and said that phrase always shows up right before the truth does. He made it clear he wasn't chasing drama anymore. Drama had chased him. And now it was sitting in his studio, daring him to flinch. He revealed that the anonymous leaker had re-established contact. This time, not with fragments or hints, but with something complete. Something contextual. Joe described it as the missing piece that made every confusing decision suddenly make sense. According to the leaker, the widow hadn't just been reacting to events. She'd been responding to pressure. Pressure from someone with more reach, more influence, and far more to lose than she ever did. Joe said this person had access to Charlie's schedule, his trust, and his blind spots. Someone who didn't need to sneak around, because they were already inside. Social media erupted before Joe even finished the sentence. Names trended wildly, innocent and guilty alike, as people tried to guess who fit the description. Joe shut that down immediately. He said speculation, without evidence, only protected the real culprit. Then he dropped another bomb. He said he'd been sent a voice recording, not distorted this time, not anonymized, but raw. He didn't play it. Instead, he summarized it slowly, deliberately, like reading a verdict. The voice described steering conversations, redirecting priorities, encouraging delays, all while pretending to be supportive. It talked about keeping Charlie focused and contained. Joe paused and said the scariest part wasn't the manipulation. It was how normal it sounded. The internet went feral. Joe then addressed the widow directly, not with accusation, but with something colder. Disappointment. He said he believed she'd convinced herself she was protecting something. A legacy. A future. Maybe even herself. But protection becomes betrayal the moment truth becomes the enemy. He said her silence now spoke louder than any statement she could issue. Because when the story shifted away from her and toward the person above her, she disappeared completely. No denials. No clarifications. Just absence. Joe said that absence told him everything. The final escalation came without warning. Joe revealed that the leaker had promised one last drop. A name. Not a theory. Not a guess. A name attached to documented influence, recorded conversations, and a clear motive. Joe said he wouldn't release it yet. Not because he was afraid, but because once it was out, there would be no rewinding the consequences. Careers would end. Reputations would implode. Alliances would fracture permanently. He said he needed the public paying attention when it happened, not distracted, not skeptical, not fatigued. The reaction was instantaneous and volcanic. Some accused Joe of dangling truth for views. Others begged him to take his time and get it right. Joe responded calmly, saying the people accusing him of clout chasing had gone very quiet when they were asked to deny the evidence directly. He said no one had denied it. They'd only complained about the conversation existing. And that was the tell. When no one says you're wrong, only that you're irresponsible, it means you're close. As the episode wound down, Joe admitted something that caught everyone off guard. He said he was angry at himself. Angry for not listening sooner. Angry for trusting surfaces. Angry for assuming the worst thing that could happen already had. He said Charlie deserved better than a sanitized story. He deserved the truth, even if it was ugly, even if it burned people who claimed to love him. Joe looked exhausted, but resolved. Like someone who knew the hard part wasn't coming. It was already here. In the final moments, Joe leaned back, exhaled, and said the next time he went live, the name would be said out loud. No hints. No riddles. Just facts. He warned viewers that once it dropped, there would be no controlling the fallout. The people involved would scramble. Statements would conflict. Stories would collapse under their own weight. And the public would finally see how deep the network went. The stream ended without fanfare. No outro. No music. Just a black screen and a chat moving so fast it blurred into noise. Across the internet, one phrase dominated every platform, every language, every corner of the discourse. Who's really behind it? And somewhere, someone with everything to lose realized the countdown had already started. If you're still watching right now, understand something clearly, you're already part of this. Stories like this don't unfold quietly, and they don't reward people who scroll past and come back later asking what they missed. Every single time the internet hesitates, the truth gets buried deeper. Every time people disengage, someone powerful breathes easier. And judging by how fast this story is moving, missing the next update isn't just falling behind, it's losing the thread entirely. This is the moment where engagement matters. Not because of algorithms. Because attention is pressure. Pressure is exposure. And exposure is the only thing stories like this can't survive. If you felt your gut tighten at any point during this breakdown, hit like now so this doesn't vanish into silence. If you've connected dots, spotted inconsistencies, or felt something wasn't adding up long before it went viral, drop your theory in the comments, because the comment section has been predicting twists before they happen. And if you want to be here when the final name drops, when the fallout hits, when the narrative collapses in real time, you cannot afford to miss what comes next. Subscribe and turn notifications on, not later, not after the next clip goes viral, now. Because when the next reveal lands, it won't wait for anyone to catch up. This story is accelerating, not slowing down. And once the truth finally surfaces, there will be no rewrites, no takebacks, no second chances to say you were paying attention. Stay locked in. Stay alert. And whatever you do, don't look away now.